got an extra special surprise for you today. We've got a beloved returning theme today. In the past, I've done episodes about modifying, cutting, painting, customizing, 3D printing, all that sort of stuff with your Lego pieces. And we're going to do that today because it's been quite a while actually since I've done this theme. And it's one that people have really enjoyed in the past. Controversial, some might say, because, you know, not everyone's a big fan of cutting and painting and printing and all that sort of stuff. But if it is a route that you want to go down, this might be a bit of good inspiration for you. And hey, maybe it's worth just watching anyway, just to see if, you know, yeah, maybe you've thought about it. You've thought of dabbling in the dark arts and you've gone, all right, you know, maybe if I saw something cool that gave me some cool ideas, maybe I could indeed make something customized here. And most of the time, too, there's purist alternatives, so maybe you'll get a bit of inspiration in that regard here. But let's stop talking about how we could get inspiration, and let's dive into some Bionicle MOCs from the Bionicle community that showcase cutting, painting, modifying, bootleg pieces, all sorts of crazy stuff like that. Let's go. So the very first MOC we've got today, this MOC is by Peter Shikha, and this is Toa Iwaka, Skulking Huntress. So I'm going to read something in the description here on Flickr that Peter said here, because I think it sort of says a lot about the MOC and a lot of my thoughts on it. First off, love this MOC. But he said, "This is the first time I've spray painted this many parts of a MOC. Because of this, the build is quite simple and uses very few parts. I wanted to make a Toa of the green that represents the dangers that lie hidden in the jungle. The color scheme is technically accurate to her element. It is also inspired by Aboriginal tribes that use dark mud as camouflage to hunt, while her blue accents are supposed to be more to kind of evoke a sort of more exotic appearance." He also says that the custom mask was designed by Forge of the mask makers and bought via Shapeways. So there's a lot of stuff that we'll cover in what was just said there. First off, olive green supremacy, because olive green, fantastic color and criminally underrated in CCBS/Bionicle. I mean, really, if I'm remembering accurately, I think the only olive green pieces that I believe exist, we see on here, are those Hero Factory pieces, the you know, typical shells, and I believe those came on some of the Chima sets, but I also could be misremembering that. There's just not a lot of olive green. So I think what a great idea to really effectively repaint olive green on these pieces. You can see in some of these images. Early on, I thought this was a computer render, but it has been painted, plus the description said that. But yeah, great job at recreating olive green. That's not an easy thing to do, you know, but even still, great idea to do it, to be able to use that color, because it's a bit more common with system pieces, but not as common with Bionicle. And gosh, it looks nice, especially combined with the blue and the black there. It really, really pops, really looks nice. And a great way, like he said a Toa of the green or whatever it was he said specifically, but I like the idea of it being more sort of swamp-based, more sort of, you know, kind of muddy forest, that sort of thing. I think it's very, very fitting and a really good interpretation on a sort of more jungle-based Toa of sorts, which you don't really see every day. So immediately there, I love the fact that this has been painted to do that, to go a place where not a lot of people have gone before, just because of the color restrictions that we've had with CCBS, unfortunately. So I love that first and foremost. Also mentioned that custom 3D printed mask. I'm going to have some links in the description below to a few places you could go to get some cool Shapeways masks. Some of them are, of course, a little bit more expensive. Some are not. You can just straight up go and buy them through Shapeways there. Some fantastic pieces, and we'll see a few more as we go. And you would have probably seen a bunch in past BIS episodes as well. So, you know, sometimes just getting a really cool looking mask can really be a good inspiration point for many people when designing a MOC. So maybe it's worth looking into some Shapeways stuff, because it could give you some, well, it could just get those creative juices flowing and you just have a good time. You make a cool MOC. That's a good time. Additionally, something else that the description mentioned here was the inspiration with using kind of like that dark mud camouflage aesthetic from like, you know, Aboriginal tribes or more you know, different things like that. I also really like that idea. I think in general, this MOC very much matches that aesthetic. A bunch of these kind of bamboo leaf elements are used, not only on the staff, but also on the sort of you know, back of the MOC and the hair and stuff like that. And it looks fantastic. There is this awesome jungle warrior look that this character has here. And I love how that staff looks too, with that leaf element resting nicely on there. Additionally too, there is kind of this beautiful gradient on the staff as well, almost kind of like rusted metal, or maybe just some sort of, I don't know, decoration, or just kind of the natural resources of where they are picking up the sort of natural materials and making staffs out of it. I think it's a very subtle addition, but I think it's a really cool one to, I don't know, just make the staff really pop even more. It's a little sort of subtle paint job, but I think it definitely does the work there. So obviously it's a little bit more difficult if you wanted to do a purist version of this mock. The colors you'd struggle with. But you could, for the most part, replace this with, just a different color scheme. Maybe swap out a couple other pieces, and you can still get the sort of basic shape and rough look. You'd probably have to change the mask if you didn't want to do a Shapeways thing, but it is interesting to note, for the most part, you could fairly easily recreate this yourself in a purist fashion, but you'd have to change things a little bit, of course. But still, regardless, great use of coloring in things, painting things, and a great use of a beautiful Shapeways 3D printed mask there. It really does make this mock really pop and really shine. I really, really like this one. So, love your work. Really cool to see some fantastic painting. Let's move into some more kind of sort of painting. This is a mock by Kamuro Knight. Kamuro Knight? I'm going to go with that. And this mock is called, man, what is up with the really hard to pronounce names today? Saria Plazaman. Sure. So, I enjoy the sort of very subtle customization on this mock here. The last one we saw, a little bit more prominent. This one here, a little bit more subtle. And I think that's really important to note. You can go super ham and color in and paint, or keep saying coloring in, paint an entire mock in multiple different colors, really just layer over the top all these customized armor that you've made or whatever. Or you could just do little subtle stuff that probably goes a long way, much like this one here. So when we look at the mask, this is Nakama Metru's mask flipped upside down, and we can see that they've added what kind of looks like maybe stickers. It's a little hard to tell. It could also just be paint. I'm not fully sure. But regardless, they've added these sort of red eyes and these sort of little yellow highlights at the back of the mask as well. Very subtle, but I think it goes a long way. And to me, it starts to take the original mask and make the sort of natural bumps in the top of the head almost look a little bit bug-like, perhaps. It just kind of looks like the sort of aesthetic you might see on a bug or a bee, perhaps. Maybe that's a little bit more furry rather than like thorny, perhaps. But to me, it has that bug aesthetic. And this entire mock has that bug aesthetic as well, whether it's those beautiful wings using those trans-orange Mars mission cockpit pieces. They work great as wings. Whether it's the foot design there that looks very sort of bug-like naturally. And even to some degree, you could argue the weapons don't actually look bug-like at all. I don't know what I was trying to get. Maybe you could argue they're kind of like little stingers, but it's just sort of an interpretation of a stinger that's more of a gun. I don't know. I think I'm kind of pushing it with that one there, but maybe they kind of look like they have stripes. I don't know. There's little subtle hints at this being a little more bee-like or bug-like, so it's loose, but it works. Still, I think this is a great way of extending that sort of bug or bee metaphor that this mock kind of sort of has. And it's just a sort of simple case of making those customized eyes and stripes and things look a little bit more like compound eyes that you might see on a bug or something, or the stripes that you'd see on a bee, that sort of thing. A little subtle stuff, but it does go a long way, and it does really complete the aesthetic here. Sure, you maybe could have used some other masks, but there's not really a huge amount of Bionicle masks that have that kind of bug look to them. So in this sense, you can really achieve a look that you maybe otherwise couldn't, and it's a little more subtle, but it goes a long way. And if you're like me, maybe you have a bunch of that Nakama mask, because I think I got one once on a mask lot that I bought on eBay. I think I have like 12 of them. So, if you've got a couple lying around, it doesn't necessarily hurt to customize one. You've still got a bunch of the original, so you're not going to damage it in that sense. So certainly something to have a little bit of a think about, depending on how many you may or may not have in your collection of the piece that you want to customize. It's up to you. But, definitely have a think or two before you paint or cut or modify any sort of super rare Bionicle mask, because, rather sell that or, have it as a prized object in your collection than, lose some of its value. But again, that's your choice. If you want to do it, you can. But still, I love the general aesthetic of this mock. Some of the other stuff that I love that this one has going on is the interchangeable weapons. So we spoke about those sort of stinger bee-like weapons that sort of appear to be almost kind of like little plasma rifles or little handheld guns, which really fun looking design. Great idea to use those wheel pieces there for sort of gun barrels. It works well. But in some of these pictures, they also have almost kind of like boxer mitts, or just sort of like really big bulky hands that sort of maybe some sort of like power glove that kind of really enhances their melee combat like that. It's hard to say, but regardless, it looks really cool, and it really does give this mock a very fun aesthetic, and you kind of get a bit of a better picture of how they might fight in combat, and maybe a bit of the personality that they have too, maybe a little bit sort of quirky and fun. At least that's the look that I get from just seeing this weapon being attached here. But I think it's a really effective and really cool looking weapon design, and yeah, it's not one you see all that often as well. So I love the idea of a sort of more sort of boxer focused character in that regard. Really, really nice work, really clever idea and really clever thought. So overall, yeah, fantastic mock and little subtle bits there that fit the theme. Let's move on now to a mock by Anuku, and this is called Toa Boju. So I want to read a bunch of the description on here because Anuku in the past has specifically requested that I do, so by all means, I will be happy to do so. I've cut little bits of it out just because there is a good whack of it, but I think very similar to the first mock there's a lot we can learn from by reading this description, so let's do exactly that. So the first little bit of the description is a little bit of story for the character. It says, never quite content with the cushy life of a Matoran princess of Kordak Nui's steppe villages, Boju proved to possess remarkable leader qualities when Dark Hunters invaded her home, proving her worthy of becoming Kojol's Toa Hagar of Air alongside Toa Anuku. Awesome. Love the little bit of backstory there. Always fun to read a little bit of that sort of stuff. But let's move on to some of the other stuff that Anuku was saying here. So Boju's mock has been basically done for a while. He was just waiting on one last piece, which was the opening glider staff that he obviously modeled off of Aang's air glider from Avatar: The Last Airbender. He was going to make some modifications to it before he was ready to have that be publicly printed, but I imagine by the time this episode comes out, it's ready, because to my knowledge, this is a little bit of an older mock. Well, no, this was posted in 2020, so yeah, it's yes and no. Depends how busy he was, I suppose. But regardless, he says that some of the other elements, like the Konoe Calyx and some of the other designs, are available on Shapeways, which I'll talk about in a hot second there. He said that the staff itself was certainly a challenge, obviously basing it off Aang's air glider to a degree. It was hard to pull off, but he used a bunch of tissue paper, I imagine, for the actual sort of sail part there. And he said that it's not quite perfect, but I'll be honest, it kind of is. I think it looks fantastic. Some of the other stuff that he went on to say was that he based elements of this character's personality off of elements of his own personality, saying that there's elements of a sort of rare, fun-loving side with a bit of biting sarcasm. So in that sense, he says, obviously the mock feels a little bit more special to him because of that, which really cool to note that, and certainly awesome to think that you can make characters that represent different aspects of yourself. Just a fantastic idea in general. He says that the name of this mock roughly translates to sprout. However, he thinks that the name Boju could also kind of be a nickname for just some sort of very long, pretentious name. Which that's also kind of cool. A little bit of fun there as well. He also says that Boju's design integrates some kind of like pointy shoes and poofy pants. And this was sort of based off some concept art and different things. Very, very similar to like an Arabian princess. But he was also kind of going for that kind of slight feudal Japan sort of... I know, that's where a lot of the ideas were born in specifically from what he's saying here. One final little note, he said that this cloth piece was repurposed from his mock Toa Kazi. I love that idea too. If you are doing customized cloth or you're painting pieces or you're buying 3D printed parts, whatever, the idea of really repurposing them in multiple mocks, in future mocks, and kind of passing them around in that sense, because, well, it's nice to know that all the work that you put into making those specific elements, it really gets a good long life, which I think is certainly really cool. So that's pretty much it for all the different description stuff that I wanted to read there. But let's just touch upon some of the things that I specifically really enjoy about this mock. Of course, the glider, like I said, really awesome, really, really well designed. And I think just honestly looks fantastic. I think for the most part, you could fairly easily recreate this in a purist sense. It may not look as sort of specific or detailed. You could probably get some sort of pirate ship sail piece or something, or a wing from a Ninjago dragon or something, and put some sort of Technic apparatus together to create something fairly similar. But going this customized route, you can really get kind of nitty gritty and very sort of focused and detailed with it. So in general, I think that's a fantastic idea for a Toa of Air. Of course, it has that Avatar: The Last Airbender inspiration, which is always crisp and nice. But I'd love to see similar stuff like that on many other mocks in the future, because it's a fantastic idea. Also, just the general design of Boju here is fantastic, using a Shapeways mask there, which I said I'd touch upon. So again, links in the description below to some Shapeways stuff. You can always order that stuff yourself. And we'll see some other really cool stuff that you could order from places like that later on in the episode as well. So yeah, awesome mock, really, really fantastic stuff going on with this one here, and love your work. Let's move on to the next one now. This is by Fida, and this is Nasir. So this one again has a little bit of painting to it. The mask is just purely painted black there. But one of the other beautiful things about this that is, certainly non-purist is the element of introducing a whole bunch of cloth stuff and these customized weapons and even these sort of like leather straps almost. To me, this adds this beautiful additional level of sort of like depth and detail that you could add onto a mock. The idea of kind of basing it off sort of like medieval fantasy design, specifically stuff from maybe like Assassin's Creed even, where you have these beautiful, really kind of like robe, leather heavy designs that you could kind of recreate that with just sort of straight Lego pieces. It'd be quite difficult. So, to really achieve this sort of specific look, which would be really hard to achieve normally, going that customized route of using non-official cloth pieces, or maybe even some official cloth pieces, totally up to you, to really effectively recreate this is more or less the only way to do it. So in that sense, I think it's really cool to open up a brand new possibility of really adding like depth and detail with cloth that you just couldn't do with typical Lego pieces. This is really awesome in that sense. The sort of red sash or kind of like belt, or this orange sash kind of going down the side there. Beautiful sort of striking colors, and again, it really matches some of the different designs that I'd be showing you here at the moment, which I don't know if that's the specific inspiration for this mock here, but it certainly is along the lines of that to a degree. The weapon is also quite interesting as well. This almost sort of like crescent moon shaped blade there, very interesting. And it's also kind of got that leather strap sort of wrapped around the actual like axle itself there, or the sort of hilt of the weapon there. I guess you could maybe do that with like a Lego string elements, or maybe the shoelace from the new Adidas shoe set, perhaps. So there might be some purist alternatives to that, but it would be quite difficult. Maybe you could wrap around flex tube. Again, that might be a bit harder, but there's a few possibilities you could maybe think of if you were doing a purist version. But I think this one's certainly interesting and unique, and that's really cool. So yeah, I think this is kind of, for the most part, what I wanted to touch upon with this mock is just that. Like, can you play around with a lot of customized cloth and really dip into kind of brand new, totally different areas of customizing and building a Bionicle. Final thing, I've said this a bunch in the past with cloth. Obviously, the main kind of focus on this is the cloth. A lot of the sort of body elements underneath you can kind of hide under the cloth. So, I don't know, maybe if you're kind of struggling on certain areas of a mock, it might be a good idea to introduce a bit of cloth onto the mock, or the areas that you're having trouble with, to just kind of cover it up to a degree. But, that's not necessarily cheating or just sort of, pushing it under the rug or whatever. It can look really nice as well. So, I don't know, something to consider, something to think about, that's for sure. On to the final mock now. This is by Shubi4000, and this is Amphiloria. Now, this one here ain't got any painting, ain't got any cutting, any of that sort of stuff, but it does use some bootleg pieces, which of course is a little bit different from Shapeways. So again, there'll be some links in the description to some places that you could look into for some bootleg sets. There's a bunch that do exist. I don't know the name or the place to look for this specific one. But hey, maybe and you can let some people know. But regardless, there are some really awesome knockoff brands or bootleg sets, all that sort of stuff. Some of them have varying levels of ethics and morals and stuff. Some of them just straight up steal from AFOLs, which that's not okay. But of course, much like any company in the world, they have, rival companies. And these are people who are just kind of taking a crack at CCBS or Construction. It's not Lego at all. It's often sort of lower quality pieces, or sometimes super low quality pieces that are quite brittle and break. It depends where you go, depends what you look into. But, obviously here on this channel, I'm a big supporter of Lego as a company and as a brand, and I mainly just buy Lego stuff. I like to support a few companies that make, like kind of customized, like pad printed minifigures and things, and I do enjoy the Shapeways stuff, all that sort of, things like that. But I'm not a big fan of those sort of knockoff brands necessarily, personally, but hey, you might be. And when we look at a mock like this, you can see some absolutely amazing stuff that you can achieve with it. So certainly not something to knock by any stretch. If it's something that tickles your fancy, why not head over to, well, the links in the description there, and you can certainly see some of the things that you may be able to get. And the beautiful thing about some of these bootleg sets is they come with recolored pieces that just straight up didn't exist, or brand new pieces altogether, or just, weird, crazy stuff. So gives you a lot of creative possibilities, that's for sure. As long as it's the route that you want to go down. You can do it if you want. You don't have to. Totally up to you. Regardless, let's talk about this mock here. So, there's this kind of beautiful alien-like quality to this. I don't know. It's kind of this beautiful natural sheen that these Azure pieces have. Specifically, these bootleg pieces. I'll point them out for you. The mask, the torso, these funky weird pieces that are on the lower legs in Azure and the upper sort of middle arm, whatever you want to call that there. I guess it's the lower arm, really. Those are all the sort of main kind of bootleg pieces. Some of the lime, almost sort of Hero Factory shell pieces, those are also bootleg because they are a slightly different shape. And maybe there's some others that I'm not noticing, but for the most part, that's it. Just looking at all those pieces, I don't know, the natural kind of texture to them, to me, kind of looks like sort of the very typical kind of green Martian that you would see from most sort of concepts of what aliens would probably look like if they existed. And I think that's really cool. I think it's really, really cool. And just certainly very unique at the same time. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about being able to use bootleg stuff like this, is you can just get very odd, distinct, different looks that you straight up can't achieve with Lego, because that's the way that Lego looks, and this is the way that these bootleg pieces look. They're different, So you get some cool stuff. And also, I think in general, the general shapes of these bootleg pieces look awesome. Very unique, very different, that's for sure. You can just get some cool stuff with it. So by all means, I think that's one of the beauties of bootleg stuff. You can really play around in some brand new areas, and it's certainly worth investigating. Some other little slight details that I really enjoy is the mutter feet on the bottom of this mock, using some of those cheese slope pieces, and I can't quite tell, there is another piece in there, but I can't quite see in these images here. Just to, give a little sort of slight jut out of that leg, just to make it slightly bigger and just add a little bit more pizzazz to it. I think it's really cool. Another little detail I quite enjoy is the inclusion of just that little subtle cheese slope there on the lower arm on the inside there, just to give it a little bit of extra, armoring there. It's really cool. And finally, I also quite enjoy the almost sort of knee pads on this mock here. When we look at the knee area here on this mock, there is that bootleg lime Hero Factory shell piece, and that appears to have simply been attached with the typical pneumatic tube piece that you use on the bulk of your finger designs. Doesn't use it on this specific finger design here, but it's the piece that was used on like the Hydraxon set to give the finger design. That's been used here just to attach that Hero Factory shell, and it just sort of juts out ever so slightly there, obviously being inserted into both the natural holes in those Hero Factory shell pieces. And that little slight jut, it does look a little bit like a knee pad of sorts, and it's just a really nice design, so it's pretty cool. That's about it for these mocks today. Hopefully they gave you a little bit of food for thought about whether or not you want to do any sort of customization or painting or supporting 3D printing or bootleg stuff. That's totally up to you. You don't have to if you don't want to, but we've certainly seen today that there's some really cool possibilities that you could achieve with it if you did want to do it. Like I said, there's links in the description if you do want to look into, Shapeways or painting. There are some companies as well that you could look into to painting your masks. There's a whole bunch of links in the description, so be sure to check that out. And also there'll be links in the description to all the mocks that you saw in today's episode. So if you want to see some of the other stuff these builders have done, the links are all there for you to check out. Additionally, there's links in the description to my own social media, so you can check out some of the stuff that I've got going on over there as well, if that tickles your fancy. And finally, there is the submission email that's in the description, but it's also on your screen right now. So if you want to submit some of your own mocks to the show, that's the place to do it. Obviously, submit whatever you want. Pictures, images, info, whatever, as little or as much as you want. It doesn't matter. And you don't need to submit because of whatever the next episode's going to be or whatever. Just submit stuff. I tend to base episodes around submissions, so it's totally up to you. Thank you very much for listening. Hopefully you very much enjoyed, and hopefully you've been inspired a little bit too. Thank you very much for listening. Happy building, and bye for now.